Let's talk about trash. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to another episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Wish I did this a few weeks ago because then the Vikings would have been on this list. Grossi, and today we are going to be taking a look at the top 5 worst teams in the NFL as we head into Week 11. Before we get to that, I want a big shout and thank you to some brand new patrons and YouTube members. First, over on the Patreon side of things, we have Tom. Your show is awesome, and you do great work. I made this account to support you. But also to hear you say that Patrick Mahomes is better than Aaron Rodgers. And over on the YouTube side of things, we have Michael Waters, Connor223, we have L. Chris, Andy X, and Puppet Master. A big shout out and thank you to you all. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this was really difficult. I spent hours on this list. I mean, we all know who the worst team is. I mean, we don't really have to talk about that and not a whole lot of arguing there. But this was difficult because there's a lot of bad football teams. Like, for example, you had the Denver Broncos, right, who I thought about putting on this list, especially after the performance that they put in this past Sunday in which Drew Lock threw 4 interceptions. And now people are like, oh, God, is Drew Lock the person? But is it just because they're, so injury-riddled? But then again, John Elway does not have a good track record of picking good quarterbacks. And so they potentially were about to make the list. You have the Bengals, who Joe Burrow has been playing well, T. Higgins has been playing well, but their offensive line is straight trash. Their defense is not good. I mean, look what the Steelers did to them. They literally abused them. And so when making this list, it was a mix of stats. It's a mix of looking at the games themselves. And I feel like there's a lot of room for potential alternates on some of this list. Again, not the top one. That belongs to the New York Jets. I know you're not supposed to spoil a video, but I mean, we all know. And so, let's start with it, counting back from 5 all the way to the worst team in the league, starting with number 5. I got the Houston Texans. Now, here's why the Houston Texans are on this list. 1, the only 2 teams that they have beaten are the Jaguars twice, so it's actually only 1 team that they have beaten. Other than that, they have not looked good. Their defense is pretty darn terrible. Listen, Deshaun Watson is still fantastic and is wonderful, but they have no running game whatsoever. And they're also on this list just because I have to look outside of this season. Because for a lot of other teams on this list, the promise of drafting a franchise QB is on the horizon. And for the Texans, I mean, they don't need a franchise QB, but they're not even going to get help considering the Miami Dolphins own their first 2 picks. So not only is this a sad season, but it's going to be a sad offseason for the Houston Texans. And that's just too much sadness to leave them out of the 5 worst teams. Number 4, you have the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, hold on. I'm going to tell you right now before you throw a rock. Here's what I'm going to tell you. The Washington football team is not on this list, and I struggled with that because I was like, oh, okay, everyone craps all over the Washington football team. That's fine. But I couldn't bring myself to put them on the list instead of the Eagles. And here's why. The Washington football team right now has the number 1 pass defense. I know it doesn't look like it, but they do. They're number 5 overall in total yards allowed, which is pretty darn good. And the Eagles offense is only 1 spot ahead of the Washington football team's offense right now in terms of total yards. And the reason I'm saying this is because I think the Washington football team has a better defense. And on top of that, with Alex Smith coming in, I think that they're going to do better. And I think at the same time, with the Eagles, who come off a bye week, and at the same time, the Eagles lost to the Giants. They made the Giants look good. And I'm not gonna lie, the Giants aren't on this list because they went toe-to-toe with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then they slapped the Eagles in the face. So the Eagles are on this list not only because they're playing poorly, but also all the talent they have on their team. It's just sloppy football. They didn't convert a single 3rd down against the Giants. Come on, man. And I had thought that maybe I was going to put the Washington football team here or the Bengals here, But right now, the Eagles, I think, deserve a spot in the worst 5 teams right now because of the amount of talent that they're wasting. Carson Wentz has not looked good. In certain games, he has these flashes of looking amazing, and then he just plummets back down to earth, and it's just not good. The Eagles might be the best team in the NFC East, but that's not saying much. And right now, for future outlook, I wouldn't be surprised if they wind up not winning the NFC East, which is a travesty at this point. Number 3, speaking of travesties, you have the Dallas Cowboys sitting at 2-7. All those weapons and nowhere to go. Their defense is one of the worst in the entire league. Their offense can't seem to get it together. Now, I will say, obviously, there is the loss of Dak Prescott, but they were barely squeaking out wins when they even had Dak Prescott. And what this reminds me of is when Mike McCarthy had Aaron Rodgers go down, and he still had all this talent that was on the offense, and they could not utilize it in any way, shape, or form. Now, they looked pretty good against the Steelers, and there's room for the Cowboys to potentially even take this thing. But the Cowboys have not proven to me in any way, shape, or form that they are a competent football team. And right now, I can't in good conscience rank them above the 3rd worst team in the league, because they're really, really bad. They've allowed the most points in the NFL, and even if they're able to squeeze out a couple of games, yeah, this is pretty embarrassing. Number 2, you got the Jacksonville Jaguar sitting at 1-8. The team that the Packers almost lost to. Doesn't feel good. They have 8 straight losses, and listen, there are some good things. Robinson looks good. Shark looks good. And then that's about it. That's about the entire list there. Their defense is pretty terrible. Their offense really can't do a whole lot. I mean, their special teams, they got a punt return for a touchdown on Sunday, so that's something. It's not going to translate to a win, but that's something. The Jaguars are also in this position because Gardner Minshew is most likely not going to be their starter. And you might say, Tom, isn't that biased and unfair? And I would say, absolutely, but this is my show. And Gardner Minshew is an American hero, and you should idolize him. So if he's not your starter, what are the Jacksonville Jaguars? Trash. And they might have been trash before, but now they're trash without a mustache. And that's unforgivable. And finally, number 1, we all know what this is. It's the New Jersey Jets, sitting at 0-9. Now listen, they put up a good fight against the Patriots, so kudos to them. They're ranking in the bottom 5 in nearly every single category on offense and defense in the entire league. And they're running out of chances actually to win football games. You look ahead at like the Chargers, and maybe the Chargers will blow that game because they're a pretty terrible team. But yeah, the Jets are probably not going to win that game. Maybe they'll be able to pull one against the Dolphins, but the Dolphins have been looking good and they've been surging. So you're just looking ahead and you're like, yeah, this is not going to be smooth sailing. And the Jets are sailing right off the end of the earth. But that boat might land right in the lap of Trevor Lawrence, who then might go, you know what? I don't really need to play football. Sam Darnold, I've defended for a while, and I still think that he is surrounded by terrible teammates. But at the same time, he also has not looked good. Obviously, he's been dealing with injuries and stuff like that, too. But Adam Gase is an atrocious head coach who should have been fired, I don't know, like 6 years ago. And on top of that, their defense has been decimated. Adams is no longer on the team, though it seems that, the Jets might have won out on that trade because of all the value that they got. But you also have Mosley, who was gone because of COVID, so obviously that's going to make them look worse. I would say that the Jets are going to be better next season, but that's such a low bar that even if they win one game, they might be better next season. So basically what I'm saying is, I'll see you next year on this list too, Jets. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Should there be other teams on here like the Bears? The only reason you're not on here is because of your defense, but give it a couple more weeks. Give it a couple more weeks. Should the Bengals be on there? Should the Washington football team be on there? Should the Falcons be on there? Should the Chargers be on there? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy on all social media. See down below. Check out podcasts on iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout and thank you to all the patrons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy and the YouTube members. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.